It's time for another installment of The Basics, and in keeping with the theme from the previous episode of the X-Files CCG, I want to explain today why a lot of the combat situations in the X-Files CCG is meaningless and all it does is eat up time and resources. So let's get started so I can show you what I'm talking about. While the X-Files CCG is based on investigation, I've said this many times, the objective is to figure out your opponent's X-File and expose it. There are a lot of combat situations, but in my personal opinion and experience in the past of playing the X-Files CCG, the combat slows the game down and a lot of it is unnecessary. And while it is a part of the game and you're trying to negate what your opponent's agents are doing in terms of investigation, sometimes the game can just turn into a straight combat fest, and that drives me nuts. So in the game, with weapons like knives, Mini 14 assault rifles, shotguns, any kind of weapon that deals with long-range combat. I'm not talking about short-range combat or close quarters with kicks and punches and all that, but I'm talking about main weapons. And even though the knife is a short-range combat, it does get in the way and it falls into this category of needless combat. Now there are ways to defend against that, which is Kevlar vests and using combat cards like body armor and blocks, cards like take cover, even though someone could be using semi-jacketed hollow points to increase long-range combat and LRC skills. It's just, there's too many ways to get involved in a lot of long-range combat, and the combat cards themselves, like fast draw, covering fire, there's too many cards out there that can initiate a lot of this combat, and it really takes away from the bulk of the game. And again, this is in my own opinion, but I have experience playing the game over many years, and I've always been that guy when I create a deck for the X-Files CCG is to not include too many combat or weapons cards. I prefer to have more useful equipment that help you solve problems and do your investigation, because at the end of the day, as much as you can get in combat situations in the X-Files CCG, it does slow the game down because it takes away from the investigation. And I've mentioned on previous shows that it's okay to have a little combat, but if you're halfway through a game and you're getting closer to an investigation to reveal an X-File, or your opponent's doing the same thing to you, and all of a sudden all this turn after turn of needless combat breaks out, it just ruins everything for you. And like I said, there's ways to protect with certain cards that I've already showed you, but you don't know what your opponent has in his deck. And if he's one of those people focused on combat, he's bringing out all these assault rifles, shotguns, and things like that to initiate more long-range combat, it's going to take a while to get back to the investigation phase. And this is due mostly because agents are getting injured and going to the hospital, which takes them away from their investigation. Now, I'm not saying there shouldn't be any combat at all, because it's a big part of the game to a certain extent, but needless combat and turn after turn of combat, all it does is bog down the investigations, the game takes longer, and by the time you or your opponent are able to figure out the X-File, a lot of time has passed and a lot of agents have come and gone from the hospital or been removed from the game. And as I've said before, most decks have 3-4 agents at the most. If all those agents on either side are expended, how are you going to investigate the locations and figure out the X-File? You don't. You end up with a lot of games going into needless deadlocks, and that really drives me crazy. That's all for today. Have a great day, everybody.